The Nugget. Hey folks, only me. Thought I'd share with you something kind of interesting that I stumbled across while I was going through the research for Bernard Alfred Cooper, but more importantly his execution as well. I found a memorandum for the instructions for carrying out the details of an execution, and this is a 2-page document which was issued by the Secretary of State. This would always be issued to the sheriff, the governor, and the executioner themselves just before an execution, so they could, even though these are professional people and they know what they're doing, so they could go through these details again and again and just double check that everything is right. So what I thought I'd do is read them for you. It's a two-pager, so it'll probably take about 10 minutes, but let's read through it and hopefully you might find it quite interesting. Number 1. The trapdoors shall be stained a dark colour, and the other outer edges shall be defined by a white line 3 inches broad painted around the edge of the pit outside of the traps. 2. On the day preceding the execution, the apparatus, so that is the execution equipment, they're calling it the apparatus. The apparatus for the execution shall be tested in the following manner under the supervision of the works officer, the governor being present. So that's the prison governor. The working of the scaffold will first be tested without any weight. Then a bag of sand of the same weight as the culprit will be attached to the rope and so adjusted as to allow the bag to drop equal to, or rather more than, that which the culprit shall receive, so that the rope may be stretched with force of about 1,000 foot-pounds. The working of the apparatus under these conditions will then be tested. The bag must be of the approved pattern, with a thick and well-padded neck, so as to prevent any injury to the rope and the leather. As the gutta percha around the thimble of the execution ropes hardens in cold weather. The gutta percha is a vulcanized piece of rubber of which the rope goes through, so it slips through as opposed to getting caught by the rope. Care should be taken to have it warmed and manipulated immediately before the bag is tested. After the completion of this testing, the scaffold and all of the apparatuses will be locked up and the key will be kept by the governor or other responsible officer until the morning of the execution. But the bag of sand should remain suspended all night preceding the execution, so as to take the stretch out of the rope. 4. The executioner and any other persons appointed to assist the operation should make themselves thoroughly acquainted with the working of the apparatus. 5. In order to prevent accidents during the preliminary tests and procedure, the lever will be fixed by a safety pin, and the works and other prison officer charged with the care of the apparatus during the execution will be responsible for that pin and to make sure it is properly in position. The responsibility for withdrawing the pin at the execution will rest on the executioner. 6. Death by hanging ought to result from dislocation of the neck. The length of the drop will be determined in accordance with the attached table of drops. 7. The required length of drop is regulated as follows. A. At the end of the rope which forms the noose, the executioner should see that 13 inches from the centre of the ring are marked off by a line painted around the rope. This is to be a fixed quantity, which, with the stretching of this portion of the rope and the lengthening of the neck and the body of the culprit, will result in the average depth of the neck and circumference of the neck after constriction. B. About 2 hours before the execution, the bag of sand will be raised out of the pit and be allowed another drop so as to completely stretch the rope. Then, while the bag of sand is still suspended, the executioner will measure off from the painted line on the rope the required length of drop and will make a chalk mark on the rope at this end of the length. A piece of copper wire fastened to the chain will now be stretched down that length of rope until it reaches the chalk mark, and it will be cut off there so that the cut end of the copper wire shall terminate at the upper end of the measured drop. The bag of sand will then be raised from the pit and disconnected from the rope. The chain will now so be adjusted at the bracket that the lower end of the copper wire shall reach the end of the same level from the floor of the scaffold as the height of the prisoner. The known height of the prisoner can be readily measured on the scaffold by graduated rule of 6 feet long. When the chain has been raised to the proper height, the cotter must be securely fixed through the bracket and chain. The executioner will now make a chalk mark on the floor of the scaffold, in a plumb line with the chain where the prisoner should stand. C. These details will be carried out as soon as possible after 6 a.m, so as to allow the rope time to regain a portion of its elasticity before the execution, and if possible, the gutta percha on the rope should be again warmed. Number 8. The copper wire will now be detached, and after allowing sufficient amount of rope for the easy adjustment of the noose, the slack of the rope should be fastened to the chain above the level of the head of the culprit with a pack thread. The pack thread should be just strong enough to support the rope without breaking. 9. When all the preparations are completed, the scaffold will remain in the charge of the responsible officer while the executioner goes to the pinioning room. Pinioning means the restraining of the prisoner. Number 10. The pinioning apparatus will be applied in some room or place as close as practicable to the scaffold. When the culprit is pinioned and his neck is bared, he will be at once conducted to the scaffold. On reaching the scaffold, the procedure will be as follows. The executioner will place the culprit exactly under the part of the beam of which the rope is attached. Put on the white linen cap. Put the rope around the neck quite tightly, with the cap between the rope and the neck, the metal eye being directed forwards and placed in front of the angle of the lower jaw, so that with the constriction of the neck it may come underneath the chin. The noose should be then tight by a means of a stiff leather washer or an India rubber washer or wedge. While the executioner is carrying out the procedure as in paragraph 1, the assistant executioner will 1. Strap the culprit's legs tightly, 2. Step backwards beyond the white safety line as to be well clear of the trapdoors, 3. Give an agreed visual signal to the executioner to show that he is clear, 4. On the receipt of the signal from the assistant, the executioner will then 1. Withdraw the safety pin, and 2. Pull the lever which lets down the trapdoors. The culprit should hang for 1 hour, and then the body will be carefully raised from the pit. The rope will be removed from the neck, and also the straps from the body. In laying out the body for the inquest, the head will be raised 3 inches by placing a small piece of wood underneath it. That, ladies and gentlemen, cool, that was a tough one to read. That, ladies and gentlemen, was the memorandum from the Secretary of State about what should happen, the instructions for carrying out an execution, which, of course, we no longer do in this country. Hope you enjoyed that. There may be a nugget in a couple of weeks' time. It always depends on the episode. If there's things like that I think, you might find that interesting, I throw it in. If not, it'll be blank. Have a good one, folks. Stay safe, be good. Thank you for supporting the show. Bye-bye.